Okay, here we go. We're gonna do the first custom build of the year. It's almost April. I've waited way too long to do this, but you guys said, Jay, please do more builds and fun water-cooled projects and things. We missed that kind of content. We don't give a shit about GPUs because we can't afford them anyway. So this is actually a build that's been talked about and sort of planned for quite a few months now for my friend. This is my friend Kris's build, and I've done many builds for him actually throughout the years. He's became a friend of the channel 10 years plus ago. So if you remember the original Red Mist with the white Case Labs SM88, and then I did a few builds for him after and for friends of his as well. He has not had a fun water-cooled gaming rig in quite a while. He works very hard in the movie industry, actually. He works with movie sets. He's a medic, so he has a very crazy schedule, and he's like, the only thing I get to do when I have time is game. I want to be able to just have a crazy overkill computer again. So that's what we're going to build for him today. He's commissioned me to do that, and I think this is going to be a pretty powerful PC. And I'm hoping to get this whole thing done in 2 videos. That's my plan. I want to get this to him as fast as possible because his graphics card is here, which means he's borrowing one of mine in the meantime, which is not a 4090. So I want to get him back to the standard he's used to. Today's video is brought to you by the new, really super cool JSUSense Melty connector shirt. You know, paying tribute to one of the best designs that's clearly ever existed. And if you don't like the Vaporwave colors, we've got our OG gray and red colors available now. So get yours by following the link in the description below.
Nice.
Ow, I have a thigh cramp. There's probably several comments going around right now that are of the theme of, why is it not a 5090 if it's supposed to be super overkill? I think that should be pretty obvious why it's not a 5090. It's the same reason why in any of my computers, I also don't have a 5090 in there, including my work PC, because I just don't trust them right now. And then obviously the money aspect of it. I have the Astro 5090 right here. You've already seen us use this with the RipGN thing. Yeah, it should be pretty obvious. The price is ridiculous. This entire build. Now he got the 4090 when it was at MSRP. The Strix 4090 was $1999, very expensive, but it's funny how that's now the baseline price of it. The Astrals are still going for $4,000 to $5,000. This entire build will cost less than that, including the cost of a 4090 today. So that is one of the reasons why we're not doing that. He was like, should I go 5090? I wanted to be a super overkill. And I said, look, I don't think you should. I just don't. I don't trust the card. I don't trust the 5090s right now. There's too many things that are just weird and happening. The 4090, as bad as that launch felt, is nothing as bad as what 5090 has felt like. So I just was like, look, the resolution you're gaming at, I think it's running an ultra wide. The games that you're playing and stuff, there's nothing wrong with the 4090. You don't need 32 gigs of VRAM, and you don't need the extra horsepower at the cost that it's gonna be. He's like, yeah, but if I sold my 4090 and we roll back to the I don't trust it kind of a thing. So it was his decision. I did nudge him to keep his card. Why add more cost? Even if you can sell this and only pay $1,000 or $1,500 maybe on top of what you could get for your 4090, why? Just roll that money into something else in your build. So the rest of the parts. The case is the most important thing for me. When someone says, Jay, I want you to build me a computer, I go, well, what case do you want to use? This is most important to decide first because it determines the rest of this. Size of the motherboard, the size of the cooler you can run, whether you're doing custom water cooling or not. So I chose the NV9 and really nudged him that way, even though we did look at some other things. We looked at the Lee 3000 V3000 Plus. He likes big cases. Remember that he had a Case Labs SM88. He had it before me. I got mine because of his. So I recommended the NV9 because it's all 140 millimeter fans. It's gigantic. Plenty of airflow, plenty of room for custom water cooling that we can just fill up with tubes and radiators and such. And speaking of rads, because of that, these are the radiators that we have. 2 Black Ice Nemesis GTR 420s. It should be 420 YOLO edition. Anyway, 2 420s, one on the top, one on the bottom. And this one here, I want to see if I can fit on the back wall, because you can put 2 140 millimeter fans vertical on top of each other in the back. So I thought it'd be neat just to have another radiator sitting back there. If it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Oh, sorry, that's really old. Comment down below if you know what that's referencing. Anyway, if it doesn't fit, we'll just have it for another build or whatever. I've already showed a lot of the other parts that are going in here, so I'm not gonna necessarily rationale it all now. X870E Tai Chi, because we've been using it on our test bench ever since this board debuted. I've had 0 issues with it, although it has had some BIOS issues with certain 9800X3Ds. I talked previously about the fact that we were doing a 9800X3D because he wanted the ultimate gaming computer. Then the 9950X3D entered the chat. And I asked him, I said, do you want to stick with the 9800X3D, or if you want to go with that super versatile high-end build, do you want to consider a 9950X3D? Because it gets you the 9800X3D plus 8 more cores and 16 more threads of high speed. It's high frequency up to what, 5.8, 5.9 gigahertz. So he was like, all right, let's do it. So there it is right there. For storage, I'm throwing in here a 4 terabyte T500. It's a Gen 4 drive. I don't have any Gen 5s. I thought I did. I personally don't think there's necessarily a reason to throw a Gen 5 drive in here, to be honest. I mean, this one caps out at 7,000 megabytes per second. Gen 5 can go as high as 14,000 and something if you get like the Crucial limited edition. This is what I'm putting in here because this is what we have. It has the capacity, it has plenty of speed. I am running a Gen 5 drive at home. A long time ago, I kind of did the upgrade to get everything on a Gen 5, and I'll be honest, in my normal gaming and browsing the systems, I don't notice the speed. I don't, but you notice the price. So I said, let's stick with Gen 4. It also guarantees that we're gonna have all Gen 5 lanes going to the 4090, which is gonna be nice. For RAM, this is just what I'm throwing in here for now. I don't know if I'm gonna use RGB RAM yet. We really wanted to use the G.Skill Trident Z Royal, because this is the build that has all the gold fittings, and I'm calling it Gold Member. I think project names are kind of dumb. We only do it because we reference it later and we know what build we're talking about. If I was like, hey, it's Chris's build, well, which one? We've done like seven Chris's builds. Or my build, which one? You've built a new system for yourself like every year since you started YouTube. You know, Phil's build. We see plenty of iterations of Phil's build, both for home and work. So that's why we give him names. I'm calling it Gold Member. He wanted black and gold to kind of match the Tai Chi sort of a theme. This is just straight, basic, black, matte black heat sinks, 6400 mega transfers. Not the fastest timings though. It's 40, 40, 40, 84s. So not the fastest. We might put a different RAM in there that has RGB and such. The reason why we didn't go with the Trident Z Royal and Gold is because, believe it or not, almost all of the G.Skill kits that have fast, tight timings that are also Expo and 6,000 mega transfers or above are in silver. The gold ones are very limited on what they did. I don't think gold sold very well with DDR4, so they didn't come up with a lot of gold options. RAM is fortunately very easy to pop out, put new ones in. So that's kind of a placeholder right now to get everything up and running. Blocks, they're the Optimus blocks. I've already showed you those. They're very black, like Cerakote, very, almost like Vanta black. They're so awesome and clean looking. There's some of the fittings, that's my pump. The cables, these did come from Cable Mod. I kept it simple. So I did black with carbon centers and gold metal combs. So I didn't want the cables to take too much attention. So it was kind of basic. Now the cool thing about Cable Mod is the fact that you can put in there in the configurator what case you're using, and it kind of has some predetermined links that make sense. The NV9 is interesting because the power supply is at the top. So you have to actually have a fairly long GPU cable to be able to make sure you can reach from the top, you know, all the way down to the graphics card. So it's a pretty long run. So that's, and I added a few millimeters because I always do. It would be inches, Phil. And then obviously I've already showed you guys this too. This is the Singularity Computers distro plate designed to basically fit in anywhere there's a 420 rad mount. So this is gonna be our pump reservoir distribution plate. And the cool thing is they always give you the different colors, right? So you can change it out. Obviously there's a gold one, which is pretty sick. And they put my logo in there, which Kris is perfectly okay with. Now, one other thing I want to point out, there is an EK Water Blocks part going in here. Because they're the only ones that make a pretty gold valve. And I love the EK Water Blocks valves. Actually, this is not one that we even got from EK. Came from Performance PCs, where we get all of our water cooling stuff like 2 years ago. This is a leftover part from when I did the EVGA tribute build. If you remember, that's all black and gold. So because I had this, I'm not gonna let it go to waste, I'm using it. So I love these because you just pull off the cap, and then when that's threaded in there, it's hard to do when it's not threaded in. But anyway, you pull that, opens the valve, and it makes for refilling and servicing the system very, very easy. The biggest reason why people don't service their systems is they don't think ahead and make it easy to evacuate the fluid. So, shut up, Phil. So let's do this. We're just gonna kind of build it as we go. I'll talk about some of the little things along the way. We'll kind of be a combination of vlog, combination montage, any snags that come up, we'll talk about it obviously. All right, so pretty basic. We're just gonna start with the motherboard installation of things that go on there. Fortunately, this case has a lot of room in it, so I don't have to really be concerned with access to reaching anything on the motherboard. One of the things I love about this board, it's not an ad for the board, I swear to God, but we've been using it for a while. Everything is toolless on here. Like, I love how easy the cover comes off for the M.2. Obviously I have to take these brackets off because I'm gonna be installing the Optimus block. Now, one of the neat things too is the fact that we do have a quick release on this side as well. So if he wants to add a Gen 5 drive or more storage, the problem is once our graphics card is on here, it slightly overhangs this, which is where there's more spots where we can add M.2, but getting to the screws is gonna be impossible with the graphics card here. So it's like, try and put the biggest storage in you can first. And I wouldn't use these necessarily without, or before these, because these are the Gen 5 lanes. So if he wants to use Gen 5, he has to use these. But I like this one right here on the side because it's easy access. So we're gonna put in CPU, we're gonna put in drive, we're gonna put in RAM, take off all these covers, and then we're gonna install the water block, which even requires their very specific tool. Like, their manual even says, only screw down till finger tight until your finger starts slipping on the knurling. That is the weirdest torque spec I have ever heard. Further proving, because this is built, designed, and manufactured in the US, that Americans will use any form of measurement but the metric system. All right, so there it is. Ugh. The board's already heavy. So drive's installed, CPU's installed, the 5950X. You might notice there's thermal paste on it. We've already pre-tested it and stuff to know it's all working. Pre-testing is important, obviously, when it comes to, nothing sucks more than doing a full rigid build and then having to drain it and take the tubes and everything off and troubleshoot because something isn't working. Anyway, the Optimus block is super heavy, and then I really do like the way that the Crucial RAM looks in there. I just need to see if we can find some tighter timing RAM for it. Because all this just kind of black without, it looks clean and classy as far as I'm concerned. But I'm just curious as to how heavy this motherboard is now. 3,212 grams. That's pretty crazy. I'm gonna do the 4090 water block next. Needs a good deep cleaning too. There's lots of dust and stuff in the fans. I guess I don't really need to clean the cooler, but some of that dust might have made its way to the PCB, so I'll use a soft like detailer brush to get that dust and stuff off, and then we'll get the block on there as well. So interesting note here on the thermal paste. This card has never been opened. The sticker was still intact on the screw that surrounds the GPU, but I feel like there's a lot of parts of this die right here that were not properly being touched by thermal paste. Because look, the part that's not being touched also equals the part here that doesn't have any thermal paste. So typically what you'd get if you separate them is you would get an inverse on the other side. So low points here would meet high points here and vice versa. These low points should have a corresponding high point. But if you look, like they go like this, right? So we flip it open, you can see the part that has no paste there is also the part that has no paste here. Now it did spread out to the outside. It created some pump out at some point, but he never complained about there being any sort of throttling or anything like that, because what could be happening here is a hot spot could cause a throttle, whereas your edge temp or the cooler parts of the die would show a perfectly normal number on like MSI Afterburner or whatever. But unless you're starting to monitor hotspot, hotspot is very much taken into account too when it does thermal throttling. So I'm curious if this card was dealing with some sort of thermal issues that weren't getting recognized. Now, depending on the game that you're playing and the resolution that you're playing at, you may never notice. So I don't know what that's all about. So it's probably a good thing that we're doing this then, because this is one of the worst applications we've seen so far. I just don't have any data on whether or not he noticed any sort of issues there. The only problem this card has ever experienced, and Kris had me verify that everything was working prior to using it, was he did experience the driver issue that started with 50 series cards, and then a lot of 40 series cards were affected too, where updated the driver and then getting black screens and no longer able to get into Windows, or you get into Windows with black screen. This Windows would boot, but you'd have no image kind of a thing. 100% driver related on that system because it works perfectly fine on our test bed. Now you might pull your card apart and see that and start freaking out. You just need to compare to the cooler side and see if it looks like a negative. It should look like a negative of what you see here, or what you see on the GPU side, but I think we are doing this just in time for him. Now I gotta clean this all up before I install the block. All right, the Optimus block is installed. It's so heavy, but anyway, you might have noticed a couple of deals with this. One, it's kind of backwards. The way the block gets installed, you install the back plate to it first and then the front, but it bows the card quite a bit when you install the back plate because you're only doing like this screw right here, and I think it's this one and this one, these two and that one. So it kind of like, so leave them on kind of loose. Then when you install the main card to the front of it and do your thermal paste and apply your thermal pads and such, a couple of them tore because they're real thin, but as long as you make sure they're touching all the parts they're supposed to, it doesn't matter if they tore. Then tighten these four in a star pattern slowly and then work your way around, because you have to crush that giant thermal pad on the back. That thing is huge. It is touching the entire back of the card, which is probably overkill, but it is. So because of that, and to make sure that once you start using it, it doesn't sort of loosen up on you, tighten it down, kind of help it, squish it even with your fingers, tighten it down more. Then more importantly, make sure you can access these screws in your, if you go vertical, that's gonna kind of be a problem, but once I get this in, it'll be staying horizontal, not vertical in this build, and it heats up that pad, it will become a little bit squishy. So I will go and tighten it again after it has gotten some heat cycles, or even while it's nice and hot, like right after a gaming session, turn it off, unplug it from the power supply, and then tighten these up again, because that big thermal pad on the back definitely likes to make it difficult to get them fully tightened down. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get my case out, get my motherboard installed, get this guy installed, because then we can start planning our loop, and I'll be able to see whether or not I can fit that slim 280 GTS on the back. I really hope I can. I think 3 rides in this would look sick and completely unnecessary, which is why I'm gonna look forward to that. I think I'm gonna use, they're a bit of a wiring mess, but I kind of want to use the Be Quiet light loop fans for these. Reason being, or the Light Wings fans. I love their subtle lighting. They're not crazy bright. And then they can just be powered off the motherboard. And I have hubs that I bought, so I can actually control the fans and the lighting off of a single hub. And if I have enough, as long as I have enough headers on the board, which I do, then that'll all work. I feel like I have used Lee & Lee fans in like every build. So I kind of want to be a little different. I have used light loop fans or the Light Wings fans in the past. I think they're going to be the perfect match to this build in terms of them just sort of being simple, would be the best way to put it. Also too, they perform very, very well, and you can't argue with that. Now the one thing I thought would be cool, but I don't know if it's gonna work, would be the 280 rad in the back right here. Now I have to consider a couple of things. I have a 420 that has to go in the top. It's a thick radiator. I'm using a thicker rad. That's why it's the GTR, as well as having the fan thickness. And I'm not bleeding yet, okay, cool. So that's gonna hang down right here. Now, I can flip the fittings to the bottom here, like that, and they'll clear, but once I add the fan thickness here, I don't think I'm gonna clear the rad for the top. The other thing too is I would have to put the fittings at the bottom, otherwise I'm gonna hit the rad at the top, which puts this really close to the GPU config area, and then trying to get from here back to the CPU, or that could have probably gone along here to the GPU and then like out here to the CPU. Like it could work, but it's all gonna depend on whether or not I can get it to clear the top rad. So this is a nice to have, not a need to have. So if I can't make this fit, I'm not gonna sweat it. To be honest, it's not gonna be that bad. I'll be using a EATX motherboard on this. So obviously this is gonna potentially be an issue. Fortunately with the NV9, this is able to be turned and adjusted and made to clear. See, this is where loop planning really starts to get a little, don't get ahead of yourself. We gotta get the components in first and see how things line up. Now you see why whenever I do a water-cooled build, I get all kinds of adapters and I get extensions at different lengths and 45s and 90s, because Sometimes you really do have to just kind of rig it all up. All right, this is where we're gonna stop today. I know it may not look like much, but there was a lot of back and forth sort of planning on this. I had to install the blocks and stuff, obviously. Gonna cover up these Be Quiet logos because these are the older Lightwings, not the Lightwings 2s where they don't have the orange on them, because I kind of complained a long time ago, and I don't think they changed it because of me, but I think a lot of you parroted like, hey, yeah, get rid of the orange. It's the same reason why I say don't put red in things, you know, for parts and whatnot, because you lock them into color schemes. Says the guy who's now trying to match in the scheme of the motherboard. Anyway, moving on. So we'd like to use our Cricut and just make black circles to black out the hubs. I thought about maybe getting like shiny gold. We'll see, maybe if that's gonna be too much gold. But now that some of the gold stuff's going in, you can kind of see the subtle accent color that the gold is gonna add, and I'm really looking forward to that. I went back and forth quite a bit on whether or not to use the angled mount for the bottom rad or the flat mount. We actually feel like the angled mount brings some interest, like it makes it interesting looking versus just being flat and traditional. I also really debated whether or not to go push-pull on the top rad, just to fill out that upper area some more. But I decided not to ultimately, because I thought it would look weird if I had push-pull here but not here, even though these are the same rad. So I thought it might have looked imbalanced. This is when I wish I had like my 3D cutter or my etching or 3D engraver or whatever already, because I could have made a cool plaque to put right here, like J2 Sense or something, you know, hand-built, whatever. But I like to do little tricks like this where I'll put the fitting on the inlet. That way I know which side the inlet is so I don't mess it up later. The flow does matter through the GPU block, just like it matters through the CPU block. CPU block I can just remember easily, it's on the bottom. It's the bottom is the inlet, top is the outlet. I can see in there easily. I can actually see the jet plate and the divider and all that, where I can't in here. Not necessarily a fan of the way this cable looks, having to do this kind of a weird swoop. That's where like the 5090 FE would be neat, because it all would have kind of stayed flat. But again, I'm not putting a 5090 in here, nor would it have been a 5090 FE, because there are no blocks available for that, and there may not ever be, even though DeBauer has been prototyping one. Put a little piece of foam under here, because this one, it likes to rattle if there's no actual drive in there. So I just put a piece of foam under there to give it some tension so that it doesn't rattle anymore. We can expand another drive into there if we want. The Singularity Computers distro plate, you can see I put the gold panel on there, and I actually reused the black panel that was initially on there just to block off some of the area up there that's kind of gross in terms of just not needing to see the fan rail and stuff. And I just used some two-sided tape for that. This is where I'm probably gonna finally make the expense to get my own laser engraver and CO2 die cutter, or not die cutter, but my own CO2 laser engraver and such, because I want to be able to make block-off panels that are very specific shapes and designs without having to try and make it out of ABS plastic and scoring it and snapping it. And you could do it that way, it looks fine. It's just, I'd like to be able to just put in some measurements in a computer and let it do its own thing, and I can have holes already cut where I want them. So this is probably gonna be me leading into that now, where I'm gonna start doing that for some of these builds. It'd be nice to be able to make block-off panels for things I want to make look cleaner. The other thing too is as you can see, I did fit the 280 rad in here. It's close, but it doesn't impact anything. They're being used as intake, by the way, because if I made those exhausts and I had 5 exhaust fans and 3 intake fans, that would be negative pressure. So there's no reason why I can't pull air in through the back, because everything's being exhausted out the top and it shouldn't recirculate. Now, there is a back door that goes on this, which has some pretty, not the greatest of porosity. Where is it at? This is actually the top panel right here, but you can see the venting, or the mesh. So it's a similar mesh to this, where there's gonna be a fair amount of airflow blocked. It looks like less than 40% porosity. I would have preferred to have had like this type of grill up top, just for maximum airflow. Because if we look at the bottom, you can see that's kind of what's on the bottom as well. See? Now, having what are these? These are 60 mil thick rads, I believe. And 2 of them on top and bottom, plus a 30 mil thick 280 back here. We have way more than enough radiator than we need. So the inefficiencies that we're gonna deal with on some of the chassis airflow stuff on the top and on the back are going to be overcome. I probably could have honestly made this an exhaust as well, and given the restrictions they have to go through, this would have been more than enough intake. But there's no reason to not flip this around. This is more of a vanity rad. It's not necessary, it's just there to be cool and like, hey, let's fill it up. Also too, this is going to be a complete pain in the ass to fill and bleed because the reservoir volume is so low inside that distro plate. I am going to more than likely be running a fill port at the top. The NV9, including almost every Fantex case, has a fill port hole at the top. So I can easily run a tube from there over to the, so it just comes straight down and over and into here, which will allow me to be able to fill it from the top without having to take the case and stuff off. And that would allow me to actually, so something you can do is because it's threaded, I can actually get a small threaded bowl or even a funnel. I've threaded funnels before onto there. And then just like burping the cooling system in a car, I can fill that up with fluid and basically let it drink from that as it's filling in. And then as we start to get to the point where we're recirculating, then I can just use a squeezy bottle at the top to top it off. But I'm probably gonna end up doing that just because it's gonna need a volume of coolant to fill in. Anyway, let's talk about loop order, and then we're gonna be ending today's video because the next video is gonna be pretty much all of the loop order for this. I have a lot of components in here, specifically in rads. I have more radiators than I have components we're cooling. So there is that. But anyway, we're gonna be coming out of here. There's 2 ports on the outlet because one is basically designed to be able to be used as a drain as well. So I haven't decided where the drain is gonna be. I haven't decided if it's even gonna be on here. I could tee off of the lower rad or something like that. I'm probably honestly gonna use this right here because this is not gonna be an easy one to drain no matter what, just because I have a top and a bottom rad. So no matter what, the drain cannot be at the lowest point. So that is usually what leads to the best drain situation. This will allow me to drain literally the component holding the least amount of fluid. So there is that. Anyway, so outlet from one of those 2 over to this rad. It's going to be an inlet right there. So that's also why I have the fitting on that side already. Little tips and tricks I use when I'm doing my stuff is I like to put the first fitting on where the inlets are gonna be. So into this radiator, out of this radiator, over here to the GPU, out of the GPU, over here, closer to the motherboard, inlet to this rad, up and through, outlet on the bottom, where we can then come into inlet on the CPU, out of the CPU, over to this radiator. There's no fitting on here because I haven't decided which one I'm going in yet. And then I have to go out from this rad, back over to this fitting right here, which is the return. You might be wondering, what are these 4 circles that are sitting here on this distro plate? In fact, Phil even asked me that. When you have something that is thin like that, and it's gonna have a decent amount of velocity going through it, vortices, right, Venturi effects can start to happen. So I have no doubt, based on the fact that it's got this little push down right here, which makes sure that the fluid that comes back returns this way because the pump directly feeds from right there, this allows to keep there from being any vortex. Those are strategically placed to break up any of those forces and make it flow more smooth. As the starts to vortex right there, it can also sort of churn and aerate the fluid and cause little micro bubbles and stuff that just don't want to go away. So I have no doubt that with the flow testing that Daniel and the guys over at Singularity Computers have experimented with on this, have determined those are the ideal spots to have those anti-vortices columns, if you will. So that is going to be the next part. That plus making these black or gold. Also too, he does still want me to test the gold splatter on a tube. I'll probably gold splatter this tube, to be honest. It's gonna be the easiest one, just to see what it's gonna look like. He basically said, I make the call, do it. If it looks dumb, don't do it. But it's not my build. And he might think it doesn't look dumb, even though I might. So I still think I'll show him some photos of it, let him decide. We'll have to make the lighting proper, because there's way more lights in here than most people would ever have in their home office or whatever. So it's gonna matter like what the lighting is like in your environment as well. So in terms of the lighting though, I do like the Be Quiet light wings, even though I have now a rat's nest of cables because there's 2 wires per fan and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which actually isn't terrible. But we have the lighting ring right here, and because they don't make a reverse flow fan, be quiet, waiting for Lightwing's reverse flow fans, reverse blade, that'd be nice. That way we can get the actual big light ring showing and not the little, we threw you some crumbs of lighting on the back of our fan lighting ring. These are intakes, so obviously we have to look at the back of the ugly hub and not the pretty face of the fan because reverse blade. So please, reverse blades. That'd be very, very nice to have. The only one that's actually gonna be different is the top, because you can see the full lighting ring. Everything else is actually, because we're looking at the back, because reverse blades. I better check. If they do have reverse blades, then you can just nullify everything I just said and I'll just order 5 of them. This piece up here is so nice that it just pops out and allows us to get access to the wiring and stuff up on the top. And speaking of wiring, I was able to get the fan wiring for back here just completely hidden. You don't see it at all. I haven't put the EPS power or the 24 power in there yet. But yeah, these little things, and they're contact pins right here on the back, as you can see, little pogo pins. So no wires or anything, so the lighting channel shows up, and then when you need to access it, you just pull it out. When you're done, boop, put it back in and you're good. So same thing with this piece right here, because I said earlier I might have had to take it off, but I forgot, and actually Phil remembered, that you can reverse it. You can, so anyway, I was able to flip it, which obviously allows us to use EATX and still maintain this pretty shroud and have that subtle RGB strip in there, which would be nice. But there's not a lot of RGB in here. The motherboard has it, the fans have it, CPU block does not, GPU block does not. There's an RGB ring built into the pump cover right here, and there's one in the reservoir itself. It's actually just the bottom lights up, like shines up, and then we'll have these strips here, and there are strips on the outside as well. Very subtle, it's not gonna be like over illuminated. So if he wants to do white light to create an illumination, he can. If he wants to do yellow light to sort of bring out the gold, we'll play around with all that. But it's all gonna be based off of the RGB software for ASRock, which I've not personally used. Maybe that OpenRGB might be used for this one, so we'll see. Anyway, time to get out of here. I did spend quite a few hours on this one today. It was nice. I haven't really gotten to do anything like this in quite a while. So I'm enjoying getting to actually get back to building some stuff that I'm passionate about. And yes, although this is loose and bugging me, there we go. So it was bothering me seeing it higher than the rest this whole time. But this is what this channel is all about, building cool computers. And as much as it sucks right now for the pricing and all that sort of stuff, I keep hoping someday it'll return to normal. But in the meantime, I'm not gonna stop doing what I love. You're gonna see a bunch of builds this year. I got a new one. I wanna do a new one for myself. This one's high too. I want to retire Skunkworks and get it on display and potentially downsize my rig, actually make it smaller. That's a whole different thing to talk about later. So, all right guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully Goldmember lives up to the expectation, but I think so far it's living up to the overkill water-cooled type of build you would expect to see on this channel. All right guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.